what I want to talk about for a minute is universities. And, back in 1998, Paul mentioned on that timeline how this was the time that strengths came online. And they actually came to universities. And that was right after, Don Clifton and the whole history of it going online, take that assessment. So it happened, it went to universities, and then within months, it got to Dr. Jeff Williamson, who I'll introduce now. And he was able to do the first ever study all about the results of StrengthsFinder on a college campus and what that can do, what that did in families, and what that did at a university. So I'm so pleased to introduce Dr. Williamson because he's been a pioneer in this field. He speaks around the country and influences universities so that they can have that kind of environment that's so important. So put your hands together. Thank you, Dr. Williamson, for coming.
Thank you so much. And it's an honor to be here. I'm starting my timer, just so you know. I realize that I'm the last thing between you and lunch, and so I want to be cognizant of that. But thanks for being here today. So it was December 2000, and Christine came walking into my office and sat down at the university where I was at the time. And she had been one of the participants in the research study that I had done that fall, where I had trained a group of first-time college students on the meaning, depth, and application of their strengths. So the interaction that I did with her and all the other students was that it was the third of the semester that I had with them. And so I interacted with them and finished that with a one-on-one sit-down. I asked them some standard questions, and in the ending of it, I asked them kind of a standard question about, were there any aha moments or takeaways, things that you'll remember about this semester and learning about your strengths. And her response was something I will never forget. And this is what she said. Jeff, for the first time in my life, I feel like it's okay to be me. Whew. I had to take a breath. Another student who came in to talk to me about the same topic, who'd been in my study, I asked her that same question, and she basically just said, man, it's just great to know I have strengths and that there's something good about me. I'm thinking at the time, and still, can you imagine being 18 years old and for the first time realizing you're awesome and there are things about you that are unique and wonderful? Man, I had to take some time after each of those interviews to just kind of process that. Well, even though I wasn't at the stage in the research study where I was, crunching all the data and t-tests and all that good stuff that tries to affirm whether I've really proved anything or not, even though that was not done, I knew then that something special had happened with those 32 students over that last semester. I'd worked with them in the fall, as I mentioned, and since then I've had opportunities to work with hundreds more. And I never get tired of seeing their expressions when we come together and they have their top strengths and we start to talk about those. Their eyes get bigger and they're like, wow, this is awesome, And I'm thinking, I don't think I'll ever get tired of that. So those expressions that are there, when they realize what their strengths are, they realize they can own them and embrace them and really dig in and do something with them, not just go, oh, that's interesting, I'll put it on this shelf or I'll pin it on the bulletin board in the kitchen and forget all about it. But it's so important that they realize that so that they too can know that it's okay to be me, right? In fact, it's not just okay, it's crucial. It's wonderful when they can figure out that it's awesome to be who they are. So, a little background. As Matt had mentioned, my strengths journey began in the late 90s and was right around that time on Paul's timeline when the StrengthsFinder started being available on a broader scale. But of course, it was a relatively new assessment. And so I was fascinated with it, and Vice President of mine at the time had introduced this to our leadership team there at the university. And so I had my first exposure to the Strengths Finder and took that. And so that was where the journey began for me. It was about the same time, too, that I was starting my doctoral studies in leadership. And little did I know how much that assessment and feedback would play into the next 20 years of my life. There was no way to have known. You've probably heard this too, but in trainings that I've done, a lot of times I'll hear people say, when they look at their strengths, that it was like looking in a mirror. Have you ever felt that way? It was incredible to watch those first-time college students have that realization. Well, as I said, I was beginning to think about what I might do with my research study. And I was working at a private university in the Midwest. And my role at that time was in the space of, freshman year experience and first semester experiences and really trying to help them engage. And that was the beginning of a lot of focus on retention in campuses beyond just, hey, we recruit them and hope for the best. So in that role, I would have dozens of students that would come through on an average day or week, and I would look at their file. I had their feedback, their test scores, and all those kinds of good things. And I would look at everything that was in there, but I would still think, gosh, it seems like there's something missing. It seems like we're just missing something significant. Because I would see a student come in, and I'd look at their file, and I would see, oh, wow, grade point average, test scores, honor roll, activities, and all these great things that they had done. And as the semester would go on, they simply crashed and burned. And it just mystified me. But at the same time, I would have a student who would come in and advise or coach with me, and they would come to campus, they would settle in and just kind of connect. And they had average test scores and average GPA and all those things that we think is what tells you, how they're going to be successful. But these students that were, for lack of the better term, average, they would come in and connect and settle in and just do great. And so I thought, man, we're missing it. There's got to be something more. So connected to that, I attended a conference not long after that, and a person that was a speaker there who ended up being very, very pivotal in my work and really just as a mentor. And that was a gentleman named Dr. Chip Anderson. And he was an educational psychologist for many years at UCLA and later at Azusa Pacific. And Chip was an expert in student motivation. So he got really fired up when he kind of discovered things that would help students be successful. He believed that there was something more that helped them accomplish what they could really do. So we had gotten acquainted at a couple of different conferences. And I was at a conference in Orlando, and since I never missed a keynote or a breakout session with him, maybe I was a groupie, I don't know. But I had been to enough of the conferences that when I would come in, he'd be like, hey, you're back, So we were talking a little bit after his session that day, and he knew I was in grad school, and then it was kind of getting that time to think about topics. And so he said, hey, aren't you about in a point in the process where you need to start thinking about your dissertation study? And I said, yeah, I think I want to do something with student strengths. His eyes got big. He looked at his watch. He goes, do you have any plans for dinner? It wouldn't have mattered if I had, I'm like, no, I don't, I'm free as bird, And so he's like, meet me downstairs at 7 o'clock. So of course I was there at about 6:30. But at dinner that night, he wanted to hear all about what I had in mind for investing in students and helping them understand that thing that was missing, in my opinion. And so that night, we sat there for 2 hours and literally took a napkin and sketched out a little itty-bitty rough outline of my dissertation. Wasn't that high tech, I wish I still had that napkin, but I don't. But Little did I know then that he and Dr. Donald Clifton were good friends and colleagues and would later write a book together called Strengths Quest. So Chip was so excited about the study and said some things that were just really exciting. And the next thing I know, he had called Dr. Clifton the very next morning and told him what I was thinking about. I'm like, whoa, this is getting way out of hand here. But he told Dr. Clifton about this study, and the next thing I knew, I was in Omaha. I was going through training, how to train and coach the others on strengths. And the Gallup organization did the study in collaboration with me. They gave me a couple of staff members that helped me with some of the research and things like that. I was thinking, okay, this train's moving almost too fast, but I was not going to get off of it. So what came of that was that, along with partnering with me on that study, was that then they provided over 300 strengths codes for me to issue to the incoming class at the university where I was doing the study. And so we had everyone at the summer orientation take the assessment. And then from that, when they came back in the fall, we did a randomly selected group of 32 students who I worked with over the course of their first semester. And as I mentioned, that was three contact points that were all face-to-face. What I did then was, at the end of that semester, was to compare outcomes between them and a control group who had had the assessment but just didn't have any more training or further feedback. And what we found was that the findings were statistically significant in the differences between those two groups for grade point average and for hours earned. So that was exciting to see that giving them that time and sequence of help on their strengths actually drove change and improvement, like you've seen with companies and our other good speakers today. So that was a while ago. This is 2018. That was 2000. So beyond what I learned from that, I've then been able to have the opportunity to train a lot of people, not just in colleges and universities, but in nonprofits and corporate situations, faith-based groups, and those kinds of things. So I want to just quickly give you 2 or 3 places where I have been able to use the findings, and also to just teach and train others who are in that space of higher education. As you might have guessed, student development is an area that has probably been the quickest to embrace strengths in my experience over the last years. So it was something that was involved in new student orientations and places like that where students would come in. So the institution where I work now, which is a different place, they, for the last 4 years, have had every single first-time student that comes to our university take their strengths, and then during the welcome week experience, when they move in before classes, they have a session about how to use those, how to apply those. And so that's been so exciting to see that become a part of the embedded experience of our students, and not just something that they do here and there. I've also had opportunity in the realm, not just student development, but also in student leadership, where our students would come in, our student leaders, our resident staff, those kinds of groups would come in, and we would help them, as they were peer-to-peer leaders, to identify how they can use their strengths as leaders and the context that those students have of their own strengths to affect change and improvement on our campus. One of the recent examples that was really a lot of fun was I had an opportunity to do this session with our women's basketball team at the university, and to have them have those aha moments and their eyes open wide, and then to talk with them and take them through some activities that they could integrate their strengths as both as a group and individuals into how they can accomplish their team mission and goals far beyond wins and losses. But we talked about their legacy as a program, their legacy as a group, and the things that they could do if they fully integrate that. So those are just a few quick examples. The other area in higher education that I have used it quite a bit is in the context of specific courses and academic programs. I just kind of quietly made the decision that any course that I write or teach, it's going to have StrengthsFinder in it, you know. I'll just figure out a way to make that happen. And so that's been fun, both in undergrad courses in business and leadership, and then graduate courses, both master's and doctoral courses in leadership, business management programs. And so I'm so excited because I'm just finishing a online course in our master's in online, or in our organizational leadership. And their final project for the course, which they had to post by Sunday, of course, I checked and they all waited till like 11:30 when it's due at midnight. But their final project is for them to design a strengths-based coaching plan for their organization, their team, their company, whatever. And I can't wait to tear into those. I'm like, it's the one time I love grading. You know, it's normally is like, oh no, if I could just teach and not grade, it would be great. But they need the feedback, and so that's an exciting thing that I'm looking forward to. So it isn't, though, just higher ed. It isn't just students and student development and particular courses in the program. But as you know from everyone before me, it fits no matter what the team or the organization, because people want to know that they have a contribution. They want to know they can do something really well. And that's the exciting part of blending all these things into the life I have. So let me land this plane, since my watch says, shut up, Jeff. I'll forever be grateful to Chip Anderson and Dr. Clifton for seeing some value in what I was thinking about. And I want to close with a reading that a friend of mine shared with me a few weeks ago. And it is from a gentleman named John O'Donohue. I'm looking around because he's here. Anyway, he was an Irish poet and philosopher. And I was listening to a podcast where he was talking about a lot of different things. There he is. He shared it with me. He was talking about a lot of different things, but in a part of that, I specifically spoke to our work lives. And here's what he said. Quote, "One of the loneliest things you can find is somebody who's in the wrong kind of work, who shouldn't be doing what they're doing, and haven't the courage to get up and leave and make a new possibility for themselves. But it is lovely when you find someone at work who's doing exactly what they dreamed they should be doing, and whose work is an expression of their inner gift." End quote. I love that. Thank you, Matt, for sharing that with me. So that's why I coach. That's why I teach. And that's why I choose to invest in others, because I want them to do what they've always dreamed and express their inner gift. I want them to soar with their strengths. Thank you.